Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Erlene Dow.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first Local Employment Dynamics, or LED, webinar of 2025. Before I introduce today's speaker, let's go over a few housekeeping rules. As mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. For your convenience, it will be uploaded to our Census Academy site with all supplemental materials relating to the webinar within 30 business days. We welcome your question during the webinar. Please submit your questions using the Q&A panel, which is located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. Once you've found the Q&A panel, make sure you choose All Panelists from the drop-down menu. This will ensure we see your question. As time allows, we will answer your questions directly through the Q&A panel, or we will share your question with the presenter to respond to during the Q&A portion of the webinar. Also, we ask that you do not include any personal or business identifiable information with your questions. We suggest keeping the chat panel open as we will provide key links and other resources throughout the webinar. Keep in mind, you won't be able to respond to the chat. That is for us to send out links and other resources related to the presentation. As you know, we are in a virtual environment and sometimes technical difficulties might occur. If you are having issues, try a different browser or consider logging out and coming back into the session. If you are having audio issues, try selecting the computer audio or calling into the webinar via phone. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the LED Partnership, in collaboration with the Council for Community and Economic Research and the Labor Market Information Institute, it is my pleasure to welcome David Wasser as he presents Exploring the Enhanced Veteran Employment Outcomes Data Tool. Recently, the U.S. Census Bureau released an expanded version of the Veteran Employment Outcomes, or VEO. The updated experimental data product now includes earnings and employment outcomes for veterans honorably discharged between 2002 and 2021, as well as from additional branches of the armed services. These data show important differences across military rank and occupation, regardless of the branch service. The Census Bureau partnered with the Department of Defense to update and expand VEO. Earnings and employment outcomes of more than 2.8 million enlisted service members are available. David Wasser is a labor economist in the Center for Economic Studies at the U.S. Census Bureau's Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics program. His research focuses on labor market monopsony and labor market institutions. Wasser received his PhD in economics from Cornell University. With that, I hand it over to David.
Hi, I'm David, and I'm an economist here at the Center for Economic Studies at the U.S. Census Bureau. And as Erlene mentioned, I'll be presenting to you today about the Enhanced Veteran Employment Outcomes Data Tool. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us here today. So let's start with a little background about the Veteran Employment Outcomes Data Tool, or VEO. VEO first began as a collaboration between the Census Bureau and the Army Office of Economic and Manpower Analysis, OEMA. In order to create, this partnership was formed in order to create statistics on labor market outcomes for veterans of the U.S. Army. What's important about VEO is that it augments traditional survey-based sources of information on veterans to provide additional information about veterans' employment and earnings after discharge by making use of the administrative records housed at the U.S. Census Bureau. For this updated and expanded version of VEO, which we are calling VEO version 2, the Census Bureau collaborated with staff from the Department of Defense to form this extended partnership that incorporates data from additional branches of the military and not just from the Army. The VEO Explorer tool, which I will demonstrate for you later in this presentation, provides public access to the VEO data tabulations in a graphical format and allows users to download the data underlying these tables, these figures as well. When developing VEO, we here at the Census Bureau thought about at least 3 interesting use cases for this data. The first is the military itself, who might be able to use this data tool in order to retain talent and recruit talent. We also thought about service members and veterans who might be interested in their post-military career planning and would like more information on what might be available to them. And finally, we also considered the needs of policymakers, and in particular, the Department of Defense Transition Assistance Program, who might be able to use the VEO data to help design targeted interventions for veterans transitioning into the civilian labor market. Now I'll get into more specifics about what is included in the VEO data product. VEO matches administrative earnings records from the Census Bureau's Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics Program, or LEHD, with data on over 2.8 million enlisted veterans who were honorably discharged from service between 2002 and 2021. These LEHD records cover over 96% of private and public sector wage and salary jobs. However, they do exclude self-employment earnings. The VEO data are also longitudinal, which means that we are able to explore employment and earnings outcomes both immediately after individuals leave service and also over longer time horizons, such as 5 and 10 years. Importantly, VEO data use state-of-the-art differential privacy techniques, which maintain individual veterans' privacy in accordance with Census Bureau's legal obligations. Now that I've given you a high-level background on what is included in VEO, I want to provide some more information about the details of what actually is included on individual data products within the Explorer tool. VEO provides statistics on numerous veteran characteristics, including several that are not observed in traditional survey-based datasets. For example, VEO includes data on military occupation, both at the 2-digit level and at the 3-digit level. It also includes information on civilian industry of employment, the state in which veterans are employed, and includes many different characteristics about the veterans themselves, including their sex, race, rank, years of military service, and others. You can also look at outcomes for veterans of different discharge cohorts, meaning we could see whether outcomes for new veterans change depending on when they left the service. And finally, as I highlighted earlier in the presentation, new to VEO version 2 is the ability to look at the outcomes of veterans from different branches of the military. Initially, VEO only included outcomes for Army veterans, but now also includes information on veterans of the Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, and Navy. Let's return to the 3 use cases I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, now that we have a better familiarity with what is contained within VEO. When thinking about the military, personnel at the military might be interested in understanding what do their personnel in specific occupations earn if they leave service for civilian jobs. Service members might be interested in the specific types of civilian jobs that would value their military experience if they were to leave the service. And finally, policymakers could be able to answer the question of which vets struggle to find good jobs initially, or perhaps who should be targeted for post-military labor market transition interventions. Let's keep these 3 use cases in mind as I show you a demonstration of the VEO Explorer tool housed on the Census Bureau's website. I'm now showing you the landing page for the Veteran Employment Outcomes Explorer data tool housed on the Census Bureau's website. The default view, which you are seeing now, includes information for 3 military occupations: infantry, data processing, and aircraft-related occupations.
David,
Yes,
excuse me, we're not seeing.
1 second. Are you able to see now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that brief interruption. So what I'm showing you now is the landing page for the VEO, or Veteran Employment Outcomes Explorer data tool, housed on the Census Bureau's website. The default view, which is shown on the screen, includes information from 3 military occupations: infantry, data processing occupations, and aircraft-related occupations. This information comes from all branches of the military and includes earnings outcomes 1 year after discharge for veterans at the 25th percentile of the earnings distribution, the 50th percentile of the earnings distribution, and the 75th percentile of the earnings distribution. As I mentioned earlier, members of the military might be interested in knowing how specific military occupations translate into post-civilian labor market. I can enter into this drop-down menu and select, for example, by searching for different occupations in the military. For example, I can look at people who are working in cyberspace maintenance or cyberspace operations. Let's click cyberspace operations to see what it shows. So the interactive tool now includes additional information. Also, clear all the selections and choose different, for example, I might be interested in who are working in radio and radar. I can compare across these military occupations based off of their earnings across all branches. In addition, I can select here at the top of the page and choose to show the information from different branches. So the view now changes. As you can see, for all occupations, it's now displaying along the horizontal axis earnings of veterans from each of these 5 different branches that are included in the VEO data tool: Army, Coast Guard, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Navy. I could still choose a different occupation, a specific occupation if I would like, by either scrolling or searching through this specific occupation dropdown. So let me choose intelligence to choose people in the military who are working in intelligence-related occupations. Here you can see information on their earnings 1 year after leaving the service for the Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Navy. You'll notice that Coast Guard does not contain data for this specific occupation, and that relates to data privacy reasons. It's also notable, looking at the screen here, that the median or 50th percentile earnings for new veterans from the Air Force is approximately $78,750, while that of those who worked in intelligence occupations, while those in the Army the median earnings is lower at $53,720. Our second use case that I discussed earlier related to military personnel or veterans who are interested in knowing where their skills might be valuable in the civilian labor market. For that, we can take a different look by choosing from the drop-down at the top to look at military occupation by industry. If I select that, we see different industries along the horizontal axis that are represented: the construction industry, the manufacturing industry, retail trade, and also professional, scientific, and technical services. These are just 4 of the available sectors that are available to view. Suppose I was working in the infantry in the military. So I can clear all of these occupations and select infantry as my occupation group. And I want to see what my earnings might look like across all industries. Here we can see across 22 different industries, the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile of earnings amongst people who formerly worked in infantry, gun crews, and seaman specialist occupations across all sectors of the US economy. You can compare and contrast the earnings at some that are relatively high and those that are relatively low. Suppose I was one of these infantry veterans, but I want to know specifically about what happens if I worked in, for example, the Navy. So now you can see specifically for those infantry personnel who are veterans of the Navy, we could see what the industry earnings differentials are across industry 1 year after leaving service. I can also look to see 5 years and 10 years after service, what these earnings look like. And so I can get a sense for how my earnings might grow over time after I leave the service. The final use case that I discussed earlier related to policymakers hoping to help veterans transition into the civilian labor market. So for example, I could look at different demographic information to see how veterans with these different demographic characteristics transition to the civilian labor market. I'm going to choose to select the enlistment education level. So here I'm showing you a line graph that shows for different cohorts of veterans who are leaving the service at different times, their median earnings 1 year after discharge across all branches of the military, broken out by their education level at the time that they enlisted. The green line at the top includes those who had some college or high school degree or higher educational attainment at the time of enlistment. The orange line indicates those with a high school diploma, and the blue line indicates those with a GED. I can also, in addition to earnings, look at the number of counts of veterans who are employed at each enlistment level. As you can see, these change over time and therefore might be the subject of different targeted measures by policymakers or those in the DoD Transition Assistance Program at different points in time. In particular, we can see here that those with a high school diploma had trouble finding jobs in the aftermath of the Great Recession in 2008, but eventually were able to recover to higher employment levels later on once the labor market recovered. And so this is a demonstration. This has been a demonstration of the VEO Explorer tool and the wide variety of questions that you might be able to find answers for using this tool. I want to leave you with a few resources that you might be able to use when accessing and learning about VEO data. First, of course, is the VEO Explorer tool, which I just demonstrated. We also have on the census website an America Counts story, which describes some of the key takeaways from this updated version of the VEO data product. And as always, we certainly welcome any questions, comments, or feedback you have on the VEO data tool at the given email address. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We can move to the Q&A now.
Thank you, David. I just want to remind everyone that the presentation will be accessible on the Census Academy website at census.gov//academy under the webinar tab within 30 days. The link has been added to the chat. Again, please type all your questions in the Q&A and keep your questions pertaining to the presentation. The chat has been disabled. Right now, we don't have any questions. Let's give it a second, please. Okay, here's a question. Do you believe military recruiters around the country will be interested in this tool as well as they can show how recruits can earn post-military?
Thank you. Yes, I do believe that this will be a valuable tool for military recruiters across the country. So something that I did not show as a capability is you're able to look at outcomes of veterans by specific states, in which state they reside, for example, which allows for more geographically specific information to be shared on the potential earnings and employment outcomes post serving in the military.
Excuse me. Okay. How were the years of service bins ranges selected? Were contract lengths considered?
Thank you. So the years of service bins are selected based off of what seems to be, based on our conversations with folks at the Department of Defense, reasonable bins for completing a regular or first term of service. So, for example, most of the cuts are made after, I believe, 6 years, in which case that corresponds to a first term of service.
Okay, let's give it a second in case there are more questions.
I should also mention briefly that each of the different visualizations that I showed, the different graphs on the VEO Explorer tool, allow the user to export the data as well, underlying each of those figures. And so if you're interested in looking at manipulating the data underlying the figures yourself, you are able to do that.
Were the geographic stats normalized?
Where the geographic stats, I'm not totally sure exactly what the questioner means by normalized. We observe the state in which each of these veterans are employed in the LEHD infrastructure. And that's the geographic information that we use in order to break out outcomes separately by state. We do not take into account states in which the veterans, for example, were born or anything like that. It's just where they are working after this military service.
I believe that's the end of our Q&A session. Turning it back over to Erling at this time.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tanja, and thank you, David. This concludes the February LED webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. David, did you want to say any closing remarks?
Sure. I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating today and for all of the questions that came during the Q&A. Hopefully you find the VEO data tool useful.
All right. Well, like I said, this concludes the February LED webinar. Join us next month on Wednesday, March 19th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time when Nicola from New Jersey Department of Labor presents Are Jobs Leaving Your State? Upon exiting this webinar, you will receive a pop-up to an evaluation. We would appreciate if you took the time to answer these questions so we may better serve you with the future webinars. Again, thank you so much to David, and on behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the LED Partnership, thank you for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.